All right, we're about to dive into a story that so many of us think we know inside and out. But we're going to look at it through a completely different lens, one that's, frankly, a lot darker. What if one of the most famous stories ever told isn't really about divine acceptance, but is actually about the terrifying, brutal reality of depression? You know the image I'm talking about, right? We've all seen the paintings, heard the sermons, this moment of quiet, solemn acceptance, a serene figure totally ready to fulfill some grand divine destiny. But you know the source texts? They tell a very, very different story. Yeah, those aren't exactly the words of someone who's at peace, are they? This is a cry from the absolute crushing depths of human despair. And it's really our starting point for a journey into an emotional state that the original texts describe with, honestly, terrifying clarity. And this brings us to the big, radical question of this whole explainer. What if Gethsemane isn't about just passively submitting to fate? What if it's about an active, agonizing, all-out confrontation with existential dread? A confrontation that maybe, just maybe, reveals a hidden truth about what depression really is. Okay, so first things first. We've got to just completely shatter that beautiful stained glass image we're all so used to. We need to look past the sanitized, cleaned-up version and see the raw, messy, psychological reality the scriptures are actually describing. I mean, just look at this contrast. On one side, you've got the story we're usually told, all serene and peaceful. But on the other, drawn straight from the source, is a portrait of a complete and total psychological breakdown. This isn't peace. This is a human being in the absolute grip of existential terror. And the evidence for this, it's right there in the text if you look for it. The original Greek uses the word agonia. We get our word agony from it, to describe his state. An anguish so profound it was causing physical trauma. He isn't just kneeling politely, he's collapsing, he's on the ground, literally begging for a way out. And then there's hematidrosis, sweating blood. That's a real, documented medical condition that only happens under the most extreme, unimaginable psychological stress. His body was literally breaking down from the inside out. So, how on earth do you even begin to wrap your head around that level of suffering? Well, for that, we're going to turn to the psychologist Carl Jung, because he gives us a framework, a kind of psychological map for understanding this terrifying descent into what he called the psychic underworld. And Jung had this amazing term for it, the night-sea journey. Now, this isn't just having a bad day or going through a rough patch. For Jung, this is a fundamental process of what it means to be human. It's this core idea that to be truly reborn, psychologically, to transform, you first have to go through a period of profound darkness, a real, honest-to-God descent. And you know what? If this whole pattern sounds kind of familiar, it's because it is. It is a pattern you find in myths and stories all over the world. The hero has to go down into the underworld, they confront the monster, they face death itself, and if they survive, they don't just go back to normal. No way. They emerge fundamentally transformed. So, what's at the bottom of this descent? What are you actually confronting down there? In this journey, the fight isn't against some monster out there. It's a confrontation with the most terrifying inner landscape you can imagine, the complete and total absence of meaning, of hope, of God. It's the void. And this is the absolute rock bottom of that journey. This is the climax of the descent. And it's not some rhetorical question for effect. It is the authentic, raw, agonizing cry of a person experiencing what feels like absolute divine abandonment. It's the moment the psychic floor just completely gives way. This right here, this is the true landscape of severe depression. It's so much more than just sadness. It's the terror that you might just cease to exist. The crushing, unbearable weight of a consciousness that feels utterly and completely alone in the universe, and the death of every single belief you once held as certain. Okay, but here's where the story takes a really critical turn. Because not everyone who enters this kind of darkness emerges transformed. In fact, the source material gives us two figures who go through the same hell, but with dramatically different outcomes. And right here, this is where we find the key to what separates destruction from transformation. Just take a look at these two side by side. Both Jesus and Judas experience profound darkness. Betrayal, the total collapse of their worlds, they both go through it. But one path leads to integration and the other leads to destruction. And the key difference, if you look at it through this Jungian lens, is consciousness. Jesus stays aware inside the agony. He holds the tension between wanting to live and accepting death. Judas, on the other hand, collapses.
He becomes completely identified with his despair, and it consumes him.
And Jung, of course, had a name for this incredible psychological skill, the transcendent function. Think of it like a psychological muscle that lets you hold two opposing truths in your mind at the same time, like this is unbearable and I am bearing it, without completely breaking. And it's that very tension that creates the space for something totally new to be born from the wreckage.
And all of this, it brings us to one final, and let's be honest, maybe the most challenging idea of them all. It forces us to completely reframe the entire purpose of our mental and spiritual lives, and it asks us to look at our own suffering in a totally new light. So let's bring this home. Let's turn the camera around and look at ourselves for a minute. The modern view tends to treat depression like a bug in the system, right? A chemical imbalance, a malfunction, something to be fixed and eliminated. But what if, what if, at least in some cases, it's not a malfunction at all? What if it's a feature? A desperate message from a deeper part of ourselves that something is profoundly wrong. See, from this perspective, depression can be the soul's protest against living an inauthentic life. It's like your psyche basically goes on strike. It shuts the whole system down because it refuses to keep living a lie. It's a painful, terrifying process, absolutely, but it might just be a necessary one of dismantling the false self to finally make room for the true one. So, you see, this completely changes what we think the goal is. Psychologically speaking, resurrection isn't about going back to the way things were before the crisis. That person is gone. It's about the emergence of a brand new, more complete self, one that has actually integrated the darkness it went through. And this is such a critical point. The transformation doesn't magically erase the suffering. The person who emerges from that Nightsea journey still carries the wounds. The scars of the descent are still there. But here's the difference. They are no longer defined by them. The wounds have become a part of a larger, more whole, more resilient identity. And that really is the heart of it, isn't it? Our culture is obsessed with happiness, but this psychological reading suggests a totally different goal. Not constant, fleeting happiness, but wholeness, the capacity to hold all the parts of yourself, the light, the dark, the joy, the pain, all of it, together in conscious awareness. And that really leaves us with one last big question to sit with. We spend so much time and energy trying to run from our darkness, right? To medicate it away, to rationalize it, to just get around it. But what if the very thing we are running from is actually the path forward? What if your darkness, your own personal Gethsemane, what if it isn't the obstacle to your life, but the very place where your true life is waiting to begin?